Good morning. Happy Sabbath, everybody. I think Will has our introduction and our welcome. I don't see Will, so I will step up. So happy Sabbath, everybody. This is Dr. Perez Pena, and she has graced us with her presence and knowledge this morning. So we will turn everything over to her and just wait to be blessed. If you have any questions, you can type them in on the YouTube channel, or you can send them to the Florida Conference, fl.conf.tlt@gmail.com. Will has our introduction and our welcome. Hold that thought. It didn't mute it first. So we will turn it over to Dr. Perez Pena. I don't see Will, so I will step up. So happy Sabbath, everybody. This is Dr. Perez Pena.
Good morning, everyone. Before Dr. Perez Pena speaks, I'd like to give a quick introduction about Dr. Perez Pena. How time flies. It was yesterday where I saw Angie as a adventurer in my church, and I'm so proud of her and all the things that the Lord has accomplished through her. Dr. Angie Perez Pena will present to us Refill. You can't pour from an empty cup. During this session, you will have the opportunity to learn the impact of unattended emotional needs have on your mental health. She will share strategies on establishing a deeper connection with those you love and how to restart past relationship after COVID-19. Furthermore, she will discuss the signs of when you or a loved one might need additional support. Let's be intentional about refilling our emotional cup. Take the time to refill. Dr. Perez Pena has a PhD, is a licensed counselor in North Carolina, a certified clinical trauma professional, and a nationally certified counselor. As a therapist, she focuses on working with adolescents and adults to developing a wellness practice through relational connectivity with self, others, and God. Let's bow our head for a quick prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for allowing us to start the Sabbath School portion. Thank you for giving us one more year of Red Zone, even though it is virtual. We hope that everybody that is logged in will have their cup filled. Thank you for allowing Dr. Angie Perez Pena to be with us and give us her knowledge, and what she have to say will come from you. In your name we pray. Amen. With us, Dr. Perez Pena.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you, everyone. It is a privilege. Time does fly by. As Jose indicated, I was part of his Adventures Club and had the privilege of learning a lot through that experience. But more importantly, through my own lived experiences, one of the things that I'm excited to share with you all is a conversation about how we can be proactive and intentional in developing our practice of filling our cup. So often we will speak about service, but we don't speak about the other side of service, which is attending to our emotional needs. Jesus modeled that best, where he would take time apart from his work of service to refill his cup from the source of filling. So we'll talk about this from a mental health perspective. I want to encourage parents. We are going to be talking at different levels. So I will try to make this applicable, but I'm going to count and trust on the adults in the conversation to facilitate those gaps and the different developments of talking to an adventure level individual child versus our more adult or adolescent individuals. So again, we'll have an opportunity to do questions and responses. And I like to emphasize the response portion because in reality, I don't have an answer for that fits all, but we'll have a conversation that hopefully gives you some ideas and creates curiosity in a way that can enhance your lived experience. So let me go ahead and share my screen. If you have questions throughout that presentation, just go ahead and enter it in the chat. Kim will be monitoring the chat and will be supporting our time together this morning to ensure that we get to as many of those and can make some intentional detours where needed and where it could be beneficial. So again, Jose introduced me, so I won't talk more about what has prepared me to be here in front of you today. But one of the things that I will touch on is why it's important for me to be here today. About my personal commitment, I identify myself as an educator, as a liveness guide, and as a therapist. But most importantly, I also identify myself as a fellow journeyer, someone that has made commitments, has made sacrifices to always live in agreement to what I believe is my calling, what I believe God has called me into, but also just living fully, aliveness. I truly believe that in this earth, while we're here, God calls us to be happy, to be joyous, to be full, and He gives us a lot of tools. He also gives us a lot of additional resources. And today we'll be talking about those additional resources that are outside of the spiritual lens, but still obviously intersect with our spiritual walk. But I will leave that conversation for a different perspective, a different individual that can speak on that. So let's jump into our conversation. And I will use the word conversation because what I bring to you today is a conversation. My intention in such a short period of time in conversing with you all is that hopefully this creates curiosity. It creates conversations. It creates interest in what may be a potential for you as you continue to live your life. So for instance, as young children, as you are, I want you to think about what it is that doesn't feel so good for you right now. We've been living through the pandemic. Maybe you have been missing your friends. Maybe you haven't had the same opportunities as you have had in the past to be with your Adventures Club or your Pathfinders Club, or just with the group of individuals that you're used to being with. And that can create some feelings of disconnection. It can leave you feeling alone. It can leave you feeling sometimes like you're missing something. But I would suggest that that feeling exists pre-COVID. It will exist post-COVID. And one of the things that I have found through my lived experience and my experience working with adolescents and children is that it's not talked about enough. As an adult now on this side of the conversation, I remember being on the other side. I remember being an adolescent and having so many questions and not feeling that there was honesty because perhaps there was fear from the adult side. What do I do if my child feels this way or my adolescent? And the reality is that sometimes all we can do is sit with those we love. We don't have answers for everything. We don't have a solution for everything, but it is more important for us to feel seen and our children and our adolescents and you leaders to feel seen than to have solutions that can be superficial and can absolutely feel almost as you're circumventing the issue, right? You're going around the actual problem, which is you're trying to fix it because of your own stuff, because of your own anxiety. So we'll start with this question. And I know we have a variety of participants. So this part is going to be a little bit more for those that have access to a smartphone. If you will take out your smartphone, those of you that are live with us, or those of you that are currently in the Zoom that have access to a smartphone, I want you to answer this question. When was the last time that maybe you felt lonely? Or in one word, how would you share how you feel today? So I want you to go to menti.com, open your browser, go to menti.com, and I want you to use the code 98469366, or you can use the QR code that's on your screen right now. I'll leave this up. I want this to be interactive, and there's no judgment behind this. And I want you to dig deep and go beneath the surface. It's okay if you're joyous, and it's okay if you're not so great. I just want you to be honest. Take a moment, take a deep breath. I'll take it with you so I can slow myself down. In one word, how do you feel today? And I'm going to share that screen of what's coming in from all our participants. Everyone can participate in this part. Those of you that are live or those of you that are in the Zoom room, if you go to menti.com and use the code 98469366, I'm going to stop my share and share the other screen. And as your responses come in, they'll start to show here. In one word, how do you feel today? If you were to check in with yourself, how are you feeling? And have a feelings wheel there in case it can generate some thought of what you're feeling. I have some responses coming in. These are anonymous. I feel tired, tense, alive, overjoyed, relieved, happy, excited, inquisitive, confused, peaceful, happy and loved. One of the things as these answers continue to generate as you participate, one of the things that I think is really important is to also understand that we feel different things at different times, right? And it's okay, whatever you're feeling. So often we have space in the church family to only speak about the things that are positive. And while we can be thankful in God and trusting in God, we can also have experiences that differ from that at different moments. And those are okay to voice. A really interesting experiment that I would say is when people ask me, how are you feeling today? It's always interesting or funny when you respond with what you're actually feeling versus just the one, like, I'm okay, or I'm great, or thanks to the Lord, I'm awesome, which can all be true. And you can also have another side of you that's like, you know what? I'm a little tired. Yeah, I'm a little, I'm feeling a little fatigued from being on the computer all day. I sometimes feel like unimportant. I feel sometimes right now, a part of me feels like, oof, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with what's next, with when do I get back into school? What does that look like if I'm going back to work, or if I've been impacted by loss of job? All these things that sometimes feel like there's not a really safe place to have that conversation. I'm hoping that with our conversation today, we start to change that culture, especially within our church, within our sphere of influence, within our family, within our experience inside our groups, our churches, our work, that we can be able to hold space for all of our feelings, not only the positive ones that have space, but for those other experiences that sometimes differ, sometimes are not as full, not as empty, or not as any of the full or empty, but in the middle. I'm okay, but I'm also feeling a little this. I'm also excited about this. Those experiences can be and experiences, not either or. So I'll let this continue to accumulate. I'm seeing some more responses, so I do want to give the opportunity for more people to respond. So I will check back in with this word cloud in just a moment to see how it continues to fill up. But let's continue the conversation. You can also, for those of you that are in Zoom, if you want to use the chat, you can also participate that way. But thank you for those of you that participated.
Could I interrupt real quick? We just got a notice that unfortunately the link is not working for YouTube to add comments, but they can apparently on Facebook and, like you said, through Zoom. So if they have any comments, unfortunately, YouTube channel doesn't allow you right now to do that. So
thank you for that notice. So if you're on YouTube, unfortunately, we cannot see those comments. But if you get on Facebook, I'm hearing that we can get your responses. But again, hopefully this is a continued conversation. If you can't ask a question to me, turn to the person next to you and talk about this while we're going along, right? This is not a one-sided conversation, even though we're on Zoom and it is a little bit one-sided. I hope that this will start to spark some internal dialogue for you. So with everything, let me give you some context, kids. So I see a lot of friendly children. So one of the things that I want to talk to you about is the difference between social isolation and loneliness. So the difference between when you have no one in your house, when you don't see anyone, and when you feel alone. There's a difference, right? There's a difference when you might be surrounded with friends and people and parents and adults that care about you. And in your head, you know that they love you, but sometimes you don't feel that way. Sometimes you feel like, well, no one gets me, or mommy doesn't get me, or papi doesn't get me, or I don't know, my teacher doesn't seem to really understand that I don't like to do that activity, but I like to do this activity, right? So you don't feel quite seen. You feel a little invisible in some spaces. And that is what that word means, loneliness. When you are in a room full of people, so it's not about the physical alone. When you're in a room without people, you may be filled with people, but you feel as if you're alone. You feel as if you're lonely. You feel as if you're invisible, right? So we can all relate to that feeling when once we felt like no one's seeing how we feel, or that we don't feel quite heard. And that can give us experiences. We can experience internally in our heart experiences of loneliness, right? So I think this is an important distinction, because we often will see, and especially I see this with generation differences, adults that say something to children, to the extent, not our adults, not those that are here today, but will say something to the extent, what do you have to feel lonely about? Or what do you have to feel sad about, right? And the reality is, it's okay. Your feelings are okay to experience. And as adults, as leaders, as ourselves, individuals that have emotions that are not just happy, but there are the full spectrum of emotions, it's important for us to model what it feels like to say, you know what, I need a little connection today. I need to model this. I need to seek some other relationships to really fill my cup. Maybe I need to spend time by myself. Maybe I need to spend some time with God. Maybe I need to spend some time in nature. The reality that even before pre-COVID, 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness. 1 of 25 adults experience mental illness that impairs their live lived experiences. So that means that for most people, they will have something that comes up in their life, some event, some trauma, some just overall overwhelmed experiences that doesn't interrupt their daily living. And for some, it actually impacts your daily living. This is true also in adolescents and children. And the reality that what we know now is that emotional pain. So if I were to scan your brain today, children, adolescents, if we were to do a brain scan and you hammered your finger, you would go, ow, right? That would hurt. You'd be like, don't do that again. That was physically painful. Well, our brains light up in our pain zones, and that is the same zones in our brain that feel and light up when we feel emotional pain, when our feelings get hurt, or when we experience the loss of someone, or when we experience something that is hard for us to sit with. When we experience emotional pain, everyone, we are experiencing the same kind of pain that you feel when you hurt your body. So the same way, I would not expect anyone that is seeing or sitting with us today to get in a car accident or fall off their bike or hurt themselves and someone just say, well, just shake it off, right? We should change that dynamic and that conversation when someone says, I don't feel great. Having the conversation of saying, tell me more. You don't feel great. I'm here. I want to listen. I want to know what it is that you feel. We don't want to just brush it off, because emotional pain is real, and sustained emotional pain can be linked to, for instance, loneliness, can be linked to decrease of quality of life, and it's related to an increase of illness, of morbidity. So people that have complications like diabetes will experience more likelihood to have morbidity. People that have, for instance, different mental illness can sometimes report having different health concerns, different heart conditions. So there's a link between our emotional health and our physical health and our spiritual health. Those are all related to each other. Does that make sense? I want to see some kids. Are we following? Some head nods? Does that make sense? Yes? Okay, good. So when you feel inside something, it's important to talk about it. And this is true with every age, with every individual that's listening to my words. We have to talk about it. So my hope with our conversation today is that this is just the beginning for the Florida Conference, for Pathfinders, for adventures, for families here in Florida, that we take the decision today to decide emotional pain is real. And when we continue to invalidate our own or our others' experience by saying you're okay, or not really listening, or not really spending time exploring that, in reality, we are part of the problem. We are creating experiences of long, little things that become big things when we grow up, right? And that's why sometimes we have those greater experiences where we do feel depression, we do feel anxiety, we do develop other symptoms. At the end of the day, if you walk away with something, I want you to hear this. Humans are hardwired for connection. This is true from the beginning of time. We were created in pairs, and we were created as social beings. God himself, God the Father, models that he is a relational being. We are hardwired for connection. That means that your brain is designed to have relationships, relationship with mom, relationship with dad, relationship with siblings, relationship with all kinds of people. And when we don't feel those relationships as connecting, if you think about it as internet speed, right? Now everyone's familiar with internet speed. Pre-COVID, you maybe didn't even know what your internet speed was. But with COVID, with Zoom, with all the online activity we do, everyone knows what their internet speed is, right? Well, connection, relationship connection is like that connection, which is sometimes we lag, sometimes it gets slow, sometimes we lose connection. And the hardwiring tells us something is off. I need connection. We need connection with ourselves. We need connection with God, and we need connection with those that we love. So it's important to understand that we are hardwired for connection. So when you feel disconnected, it is absolutely normal to feel that feeling of, I feel alone. I feel invisible. I feel lonely. I feel like no one gets me. And I got this response when I was an adolescent. I remember hearing from an adult tell me, you know what, Angie, all adolescents feel that way. You'll be okay. You'll age out. Chip up, right? And that was really unhelpful because I was experiencing something that was very real, the same way that if I was to break my hand, I would expect my adults in my life to take me to the, emergency room. I expect that all of us are having these conversations. And for most of us, just having the conversation with our loved ones is sufficient. But I'll talk about the reality that for some of us, we sometimes need a little bit more help. So the question then gets posed. Where do I go from here? Okay, there's loneliness. Yes, I can feel different levels of connection with those in my life. I can feel strong connection. I can feel a weak connection. I can feel completely disconnected. I can lose all internet, which is chaos nowadays, right? So where do I go from here? I'm going to be brief because of sake of time, but let's spend some time talking about strategies of connection. I particularly really focus on relationship. As you can tell, that's really important to me. When I do clinical work, that's what I focus on. In essence, we know that as humans, we work through disconnection. We work to connection through disconnection. And what that means is that the only way to get better at having good relationships is what? Practicing, right? So you don't get better if you don't practice. You don't get better if you don't try. You don't get better if you don't put yourself out there. But what happens a lot of time is when we're children, we're very open. And then something happens and we get a little more closed. And then something else happens when we're, emerging adults in our young 20s. And then you get more closed. And then your 20s. And then your 30s. And then your 40s. And that's why sometimes people have these really big epiphanies when they're halfway through their life and say, what have I done? I've completely disconnected from my life. I've completely just been pushing through because I needed to, because people depended on me, because I didn't have the luxury. There's generational privileges that we have, right? My parents I'm a child of immigrants. They didn't have the opportunity to come sit in the United States of America and be like, how am I feeling today? What is it that I'm feeling? They couldn't do that, right? That wasn't possible to them. So it's important to understand that we can sometimes fall into patterns. We can sometimes have adult model patterns that are not necessarily healthy, but we are responsible for ourselves. In the Bible, there it says, right, we look at our own, I don't know how to say it in English, but nuestra propia vida, our own like speck in our eye versus someone else's, because we can only change ourselves, right? We can only support ourselves. And I see a question from Kim. Yes?
Yeah, so we have a question on YouTube, and YouTube is working again. Facebook now isn't. But they're asking, so how can we be connected? How are we connected?
Thank you so much, Kim. That's a great question. So I'm going to give you 4 strategies. So these are the 4 pillars of relationship connectivity: dialogical relationships, which means that it's a relationship based on connection where both individuals are seen and where you're authentic. So authentic means you're your true self. What happens, to answer Kim's question, is that as we grow up, we start putting, I will use the word costume, out of necessity, right? We have a costume for school. We behave a certain way at school because people expect us. Then we have maybe another costume for church because, you do certain things at church. And if you feel anything different than what other people feel at church, well, then you don't want to say that because it doesn't feel safe, right? So there are things that we do, which are strategies of disconnection. We start learning to disconnect, to hide, which is where that saying, we paint ourselves to a corner. Have you ever seen those memes where a painter paints and they forget that they have to get out of what they just painted and they're in a corner in a little section, and that's the only thing that's not painted, but then they're surrounded by wet paint. So we sometimes create a life of disconnection without being ever intending to do so. So these are the 4 areas I want you to focus on: presentness, openness, directness, mutuality. I'll be brief for the sake of time. Present means when you're completely immersed in an experience or a relationship or a moment, you're in the here and now. So I'll use this experience right now. Right now, you probably have a phone. You may have someone that's coming in. Some of you maybe are excited to be here, so you want to get up and maybe like move around. Presentness means being completely focused on the thing that's happening in the moment, not worried about what happened in the past, 2 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, an hour ago, and not worried about what's coming in the future. What am I going to have for lunch? What am I going to do after this? What program is coming next, right? We're in the here and now. There's no lag. We're live. That is presentness. Openness means that we are vulnerable, that we're able to experience ourselves fully and be authentic with people, but also receive other people as their authentic self. Directness means that we are, again, based on the authenticity, we're able to communicate what we feel in a way, in a manner that is compassionate, but is still saying what we need to say, right? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then mutuality is the culmination, the addition of 1, 2, and 3, which is where we are both in the relationship. There's space for both of us. Mutuality should exist, and I'll say this slowly, even in our relationships with children, as parents, as adults. They matter just as much, and it should be a two-way street, appropriate two-way street, right? So as an adult, I'm not going to tell a child, oh, let me tell you about my stress, and this is what happened at school, and then I had this. That's not an appropriate mutual path for a child. However, it is important that we have a two-way street, that you are just as authentic, that you're not a costume, but that you are yourself as a mother, as a father, as an adult, as a Pathfinder leader, as an adventure leader, and that they themselves can be their authentic self. So this is what I want you to focus on. These are corresponding kind of homework for you all to do. So to answer the question, how do you do it? Number 1, I want you to start small and practice being completely in the moment. That means set aside any distractions. In a world that has become functioning and multitasking, what we know is that we actually have damage in our brain because we do too many things. And what we think is an inability to focus is in fact a lack of practice. So we need to practice being present. It's not going to come easy. So even right now, you're practicing this by paying attention. You're practicing by sitting down. You're practicing by listening to my words and really experiencing what they make you feel in the moment. So I want you to start something small, something like 20 minutes this week. Maybe it's a conversation during lunch with your mom or your dad or your significant other or yourself, where you just read a book or just sit in silence and just practice 20 minutes of deeply being present. The second thing I want you to do in regards to openness, I want you to consider and identify at least one person that you can practice being open. The reason why I want you to start with one person is because how we practice in one relationship will expand to other relationships. You don't want to go and start a whole bunch of different relationships. You want to start with one that maybe is the easiest, the safest, the most significant. So maybe that's your parent. Maybe that's your best friend at school. Maybe that's your spouse. Whatever that person is that you interact heavily with and that means a lot to you, maybe that's where you start. But I want you to consider if that is an open relationship. Is that a safe relationship? Because not everyone is safe. And by safe, I mean 2 things. Emotional safety is what I'm referring to. Is that person someone that I can say something to and they're not going to use it against me? They're not going to share it with someone else. They're going to really sit with my emotions and they're able to really listen to what I'm saying. And then number 3, which is being direct, I want you to practice saying what you mean. So often in our culture, we sometimes think, oh, we got to save people's feelings, right? But the reality is that we can say things in a compassionate, kind way. And I hear this a lot. I'm very direct. I'm like, are you direct or are you rude? There's a difference, right? Directness doesn't mean that we just say something abrasively and don't care. Well, you can take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. If you don't take it, that's your problem. No. Directness means I care to be understood and I want to understand you. So I'm going to work hard back and forth until we're on the same page and you understand me and I understand you. We don't have to be in agreement, but we see each other, right? So I'm going to speak whatever that is. So in a conversation that may look like, for instance, someone says something to you like, oh, I understand what you mean. I have that experience in this way. And if that's not what you meant, saying, actually, my experience is a little different. What I meant was da-da-da-da, right? So being able to go back and forth and be understood. It's like clarifying your position. Being able to, if you think of back in the day when radio, like if you think of, I'm looking at Jose in the screen here, military background, right? You would have to coordinate. You would have to go back and forth. Is this your coordinate? Is this where you're at, right? You keep going back and forth because human relationships are super complex and they're difficult. And there's a reason why we love them, but they're hard. So it takes going back and forth to triangulate, to find a place exactly where you are so I can understand you and that you can see exactly where I'm at in my emotional map. Does that make sense? So again, I'm going to count on the parents to breaking this down a little bit more for our younger kids because I understand these can be very meaty, very complex points. And then the last thing, the fourth thing you're going to do is you're going to start to think about those healthy relationships. And healthy relationships typically leave you feeling energized. They leave you feeling with empowerment. They leave you feeling like, wow, I want to do that again. So consider all those times that you walk out of a conversation being like, whew, if I don't do that for another month, I'd be fine. That is probably not where you want to start and how you want to increase your time. All relationships can improve, I believe, if there's not abuse, if there's a desire to grow. All relationships can improve, but you want to start with one that's a little bit more easy or accessible, okay? And with that, I think that we want to be mindful of the time. I want to be mindful of the time. Let me do a time check. Where are we on time, Kim, so that I make sure that we have time for our questions and responses?
Well, we have a couple more minutes. It's only 10:17, so.
So what time do we want to do questions?
It's up to you. I think we are supposed to end at 10:30.
Okay. Well, I'll do 2 more
Jose
minutes
just
here.
said 10:25. So sorry.
Okay. So let's go ahead and open it up for discussion. I'm going to stop my share and I just want to listen from everyone. Again, this is I could talk on this, as you all can tell, sustained periods of time, but I really want you to walk away with a challenge that I have for the community. And I'll leave this posted on the background. And what I will do is I will have 2 things that I want to provide you all, and I will share that with Jose, and we will post this on social media so that you have access to, if you're feeling that you're struggling or that you need some additional help, I want you to find the resources and that you reach out to someone that can support you. In the meantime, I'm going to challenge the Florida conference to be intentional with your relationships this summer. As you guys are taking a break from Pathfinders and Adventure, commit to how you will show love to one person and be specific on how you will show up. And then I want you to turn around and say, this is how you can love me. I want you to show up for me this way, using our directness skills. Be specific. People cannot show up for us if they don't know how to. So I'll use my niece. She's 2 years old and she goes around and says, Nani will go around and say, Abuelito, ¿tú me amas? Grandpa, do you love me? Tia, do you love me? She asks for her emotional needs to be met by that simple question of, do you love me, right? Words of affirmation. So be specific and ask for what you need and do so in a way that encourages others to show up for you and you to show up for them. So I want to just entertain any questions, and I'll leave this up while we answer any questions from the chat or from those that are live with us. I hope that this will create more questions for yourselves to discuss with your leaders, turn around and hopefully talk to your conferences, talk to your leaders locally, to your educators, and have this conversation of how are we showing up for each other as a community, as a family, as an individual. So Kim, I have whatever's left to answer any comments or to field any comments or questions.
So don't forget, you can type in your comments and questions on the YouTube. Looks like Facebook is still not responding. So if you have anything that you want to ask, now's your chance to type it in. If you want to continue, I'll just raise my hand when another question comes through.
Okay. Well, just to go back, these are some, just to kind of give you some warnings. we need to be open to understanding that emotional pain feels just as desperate as physical pain to those that are going through this. As a human condition, we all have episodes. It's not about when you'll experience this. It's or if you'll experience this, is when you'll experience this. So I want you to feel normal in being able to share with those that are trusted to you, saying, I don't feel good. I have gone below my baseline. So baseline is where we're still functioning, but we're not thriving, right? We want to be in the thriving section. But if you get to your baseline, this is a time to be proactive and say, you know what, mom, dad, friend, spouse, myself, if you're an adult, I need to go reach out to whatever system of care you want to, be it a counselor, be it that it's speaking to someone in your church, be it that it's journaling or doing some artistic interventions. But when we drop from the baseline, that's when we start to have clinical depression, anxiety. When we start to have sustained experience of loneliness, we start to experience those symptoms of anxiety and those more, what they can be interrupting. Yes. What they can be afflicting and kind of sustain in that way. So think about these. If you or a friend is having thoughts of wanting to die, I don't want to be here, do not feel shame. I know that the person that invited me was Jose Diaz. He cares. Though your Pathfinder leaders care. They may not know everything, but they will sit with you to help figure out where to go next. So reach out. There's a hotline here as well as a crisis text line. These are anonymous supports that you can just reach out at any time and they will support you and help you get to where you need to go. I added some resources here, but we won't go into them, but this is where you can find other therapists. You can also find some other resources and material, and I'll share this with your leaders so they can have that. I want to share with you all the responses that we've got for how are you feeling today. If anyone else wants to add to that, I will share that now. And one of the things that I will challenge is that oftentimes in church functions, we curate our answers to our audience. And sometimes we only tap into our positive feelings, which I'm excited. We have so many excited and blessed people here. But I also want you to challenge yourself and challenge those around you so that you can sit with those emotions that maybe are not as positive, but they're not negative emotions. They're just emotions. They're just telling us something about how we are doing. So this is what we got for responses. If anyone else wants to chime in, I'll leave that on as we wait for questions. But I want to thank the leaders for inviting me. I want to thank you all, boys and girls and young adults and individuals, for listening. I hope this creates more questions. And what I mean by that is I hope it makes you curious, that you can turn around and have a conversation sometime today, sometime this week with those around you and say, do you feel this way? Or how can I show up for you differently? Or I really want you to feel loved. How can I make you feel loved? And this is how you can make me feel loved. We teach people to be in relationship with us.
We had a comment over on the YouTube side, and they said that they're feeling blessed. And
Amen.
On the chat section here, a question came through. What if I'm not used to sharing my feelings, or I don't feel like anyone really wants to hear what's going on inside?
That's a great question. And I will share with you that it takes practice. That's why you want to identify someone that's safe. So for instance, I'll use a sibling relationship. My brother is a very rational, cognitive person. So he's going to talk about thoughts. What are you thinking? What are you solving? What are you doing? Right? He probably is not my first call if I'm feeling very emotionally connected or I'm feeling some distress emotion. I know he could be there for me, but that might not be his forte, right? So I want to think of the person and what I need. So being able to identify someone that is safe means someone that the first time I share something, they received it well, right? So you start with something small. It's like a practice test, a trust fall. You don't fall from a 10-foot building to find out if you trust someone and they're going to catch you. You trust fall right here, where if they don't catch you, there's very little repercussions. It's a safe amount of give and take that you can bounce back from. Does that make sense? So being able to incrementally, little by little, discover what you trust and practice, because the only way to connection is through disconnection. The only way you will feel that connection where I feel seen and others see me is by practicing and going through it. In a world that we live today, we are socialized to be disconnected and we don't even realize it. We do so many strategies of disconnection because our body's main job is to keep us safe. And by safe, I mean alive. But that doesn't mean thriving. It doesn't mean fully living. It means we just are biologically with a pulse. So I want you to push through that and go to a space where you are thriving, where you feel connected, where you feel the joys of living consistently in the space of abundance and in a space of connection, relational connection.
We have more comments. I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling neutral. Don't forget, type in your questions and we'll be happy to pass them on to the comment.
Thank you. And I had another question that came in. And one of the things I want to talk to is the leaders. Leaders, it's about listening. When you ask a question, be ready to listen. You don't have to solve it. You need to sit with it. So one of the biggest things that adults, we find ourselves in this false belief is that we're saviors. We're not. We're humans. But we can sit with our children, with ourselves, with our peers, with other people that are struggling. And the way that you do that is by simply asking a question of how are you? Does that match their affect, right? So if I say, yeah, I'm good, I would follow up on that question, right? My face doesn't match what I'm saying, right? If consistently I'm asking you how you're doing, but I notice, I observe that you're a little bit more reserved, that you're a little bit more quiet, that you're just kind of not yourself, then that could be something that you want to be mindful of. So I think we have another question. Kim?
Yeah, so another question came through. How do you help someone else talk about their feelings?
Great question. You model it. You cannot teach someone to do something you don't do yourself. So the biggest thing I would say is you model it and then you give the space. So I will share how I'm feeling. I will model it. And then I will say, I want to check in with you. There's an interest. There's a genuineness of, I want to hear you. And that is how we can teach individuals, and we can teach our little ones, especially, to take the space, to take the emotional space, to share how they're feeling, that it's okay that you're not always on a high of a joy and a combination of all the blessings. That's okay that that's not your everyday experience. If that is, that's great. But I would probably say that the average human lives somewhere in between, where we have some bad days and some good days, and we want to share all of it. We want to be authentic in our sharing. There's another question. We have
two more questions that just came through. Here's the first one. How do you identify if someone is experiencing something, even if they don't open it up to you?
That's a great question. And I would say use your God-given intuition. Use your God-given ability to observe and to notice things that are different, right? So if I go back to the signs here that I had, if you think about it, have they lost joy? Have they stopped doing activities that they used to like to do? Have they all of a sudden disengaged? Do you notice that they're maybe hiding their body more for women, for young girls? Have you noticed anything that looks different? Are they maybe self-harming? Is that something that you are noticing in their appearance? Have they said negative comments about themselves? Have they been a little more despairing than usual? These are all things you want to identify and sit with. Another question.
What happens if you don't feel good after you open up, feeling like maybe you should have kept it in?
That's a great question. That happens when we overshare with someone that maybe wasn't the right person. You will feel overall, typically, if you are in a safe environment, you should be walking away feeling better. And if you're not, then that might be a sign of, I need something a little bit more. I can't just talk about it and leave it there, because what happens is when we open a wound and we don't appropriately process it, it can actually be more harmful, because now it's like, you know, what the saying, Pandora's box. We've opened it up and we let it out, which is why we suppress things and push things down. And we're like, nope, I don't have time for it. That's a survival technique, right? We're just shoving it down in our little box of emotions until one day it either bursts open or we're intentional and address it. So sometimes, to Kim's question, we have to be intentional. Is this something big? Then maybe I need a professional. Maybe I need someone, a pastor. Maybe I need someone that's going to be able to sit with me for not just one moment, for a continued period of time. So really good question. The biggest thing I want to encourage you is, we can't control everyone's safety, but we can be safe. So how do we increase our safety for individuals to come to us? But also, how do we identify we're not everyone's caretaker, right? So the thing that happens a lot to leaders is they end up in these kind of paraprofessional relationships. You're there to sit with them, not fix it, and then identify the resources they need. You're not there to counsel them in a way that then depletes your cup, because you are in a position of a lot of influence. You need to be able to identify when it's you sitting with them and listening to them, and when it's time to call in someone that may be more beneficial, that may be more instrumental in their work with that individual, in a way that doesn't shame or identify. Of course, you always do it with the consent of, and I do this a lot with adolescents. I never bring in an adult into a conversation of an adolescent without their permission. So I will sit with them until they're ready to come to an adult. So if an adolescent tells me that they're having thoughts of suicide, I will never go and break that confidence, but they know that I have to, because I tell them that's my confidentiality agreement, right? But I will sit with them until they're ready. And I let them know when you're ready. And by ready, I mean like within the hour, within 2 hours, within that time. I'm not going to let them go if I believe they're a harm to themselves, but I'm going to sit with them until they're ready to bring in their parents, until they're ready to bring in maybe a professional, until they're ready to have that conversation bigger. So I'm going to be their advocate and their ally to make sure that they feel heard. Yes, Kim.
So another question came through. It says, how do we show someone they can open up to us and that we are there for them?
Great question. I love that question because it's such a human and relational question. The way we can do that is by truly being present, being open, by being direct, and by being mutual. And what I mean by that is when you show up and give undivided attention to an individual, you're showing them that you care. When you don't check your phone in the middle of a conversation, how many times have you been in the middle of a conversation sharing something and someone picks up their phone and they're like, yeah, I'm listening. That's not listening. That is picking up information, but listening is active. It's an action. So you can't do two things. You can't actively listen and also do your homework and also do your work and also do something else. Actively listening means that you disengage on everything else. And for that moment, be it a minute or 20 or an hour, you're there and you're present. If you don't have the time, it's better to tell someone you love, I don't have the time right now, but at 5 p.m. when I get off work, I will give you my undivided attention, right? And that's so important, especially with children, because they feel emotionally that they can't access their parents when parents are working from home. They don't distinguish that you're at work. They just see you accessible and then that you're not attending to them. So helping them understand, I can't attend to you emotionally right now, but I'm going to take a moment to let you know. And at 5 p.m., we're going to do this. At 4 p.m., at lunch, whatever it is, and following through. Being consistent and following through is so important. When we say we're going to do something, show up and do it. That is important as well. Great questions. Thank you, everyone, for your engagement and your questions. They have been excellent questions. I hope that you also turn around to those that are around you. You also have some of these answers and responses. There's no definitive answer. Of course, I can give you more guidance and others can give you more guidance. But think about it. When was the time that you felt most heard? When do you feel most joyous? When do you leave a relationship and feel that was so fun, right? When mommy and daddy are doing 3 things at a time, or when mommy and daddy are playing horse, or, you know, when your significant other puts away their computer and only has attention for you, or when you go on a family date and you guys are all together and no one has their devices and you're present. You can think about this, become aware of it, and then communicate it with those you love. I want more of this. I need more of this. This is something that makes me feel loved. I have a mother that's very different than me, personality-wise, and it's taken me many years to teach her, hey, mom, when you do this, I feel kind of crappy. But when you do this, I feel very loved, right? Even as an adult, I have to communicate how I feel loved with the relationships that I want to keep in my life. So it is not a given. It takes time and practice. We are whole little personalities in our own head. We have our own narratives, our own traumas, our own lived experience. So without communicating, it is really hard to have connecting relationships. It's an active action. So you need to embrace the practice, embrace the fact that we are wired for connection, and this connection really does create a lot of issues in our lives. And just invite those conversations and be present and increase your conversations that are connecting around you.
Do we have one last question? We'll give just a moment or two to see if there's any last question that comes through. And then Pastor Pedro will have an announcement.
Thank you to all the little ones that were here, all your adventurers here in Zoom. I saw so many attentive faces and attentive ears. Thank you for listening. I hope this is a blessing to you and that it helps you practice having really, really healthy and good relationships. Talk to your mom, your dad, those that are around you, and share what you thought about this. It's important. What you think and what you feel is valid and important. And I want you to have more space to share those with those around you.
Thank you. Pastor Pedro, you had an announcement to make?
Yes, I do. Let me first say, Dr. Perez Pena, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm amazed. Like, I'm sitting here saying I can learn a lot from what you're saying. So thank you so much. I appreciate what you've shared. And I'm going to ask, there's a little guy named Enoch. Yeah, there he is. Stephen, could you spotlight Enoch? Dr. Angie Miel was talking about, feelings, right? And Enoch, you asked a question, and I would like to give you a gift. Does anybody like to get gifts? Do you feel good when you get gifts? Yeah. So Enoch, have you ever been to Camp Kalakwa? Have you ever been to Camp Kalakwa as a summer camper? You have. Well, guess what? Today, you win a prize. You win a free week at summer camp. Either this summer or next summer, you get to go to Camp Kalakwa for free as a gift to you, just to help you have a great day and give you a gift. This is something that we want to share with you. So please, in the chat, send me something so we can get information to you. But Pathfinders and Adventures, I want you to know that we have 3 more gifts to give away, big gifts like that, to go to summer camp for 1 week for free. All you got to do is get there. Today, the first one goes to Enoch, and I want to make sure that you know that if you're in a room later on, if you're in a Zoom room, somebody might come in, like me, and say, you're the winner. And when you win a prize. So our first winner for this weekend, our first prize goes to none other than Enoch. And Enoch, are you from Lake Wales?
Yes, I am.
I didn't hear you. Yes?
Yes, I am from Lake Wales.
Okay. So you are our first winner. Pathfinders and Adventures, watch for it, wait for it somewhere, some meeting somewhere. You might see me and say, you're the next winner of a prize. So Enoch, thank you for being on this morning. Thank you for the question you asked in the chat. And that's a gift for you. And back to Kim. Thank you again, Dr. Anjamil. This was great. We appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you, everybody. We had another comment come through. Great presentation. I learned so much. She shared a lot of awareness and made us all better. Thank you so very much. We will take this moment to have closing prayer, giving you guys a few moments before you head over to the gym. Maybe give you some a bio break real quick. But if we could all bow our heads and close our eyes. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the Sabbath day, where we can just stop the worldly activities that we spend most of our time doing and just focus on how much you love us and all the things that you've made for us, all the things that you've done for us, and how you want to have a relationship with us because you love us beyond measure. Help us to see that in everything that we do. Help us to express that to others in everything that we say. Please help us to be a receptacle that other people can come and truly feel that we are there for them, that we are a safe place for them, that they can share their feelings, that they can reach out to us. Help the Holy Spirit to work with us hand in hand, giving us the words that we need to say so that we can help our friends in need. If that's our friends, if that's our neighbors, if that's our parents, our siblings, dear Lord, just be with us and have the Holy Spirit work through us so that we can help everyone know that they too are loved beyond measure. In your name, amen. So I guess